We are delighted to welcome Congressman Antonio Delgado to our Friday Forum today, and we want to remind everyone the Congressman has graciously agreed to take some questions following his remarks today. You can ask questions on the Chamber's Facebook page. Congressman, it is great to see you today. How are you and your family holding up? Great. Thanks again for taking time to speak with us today. We're hoping you can bring our members up to date on the latest news from Washington on federal efforts to combat the COVID-19, and also talk to us a bit about, if you would, how you'd like to see small businesses reopen and get our economy moving forward.
Excellent. Yes, I'm happy to jump right in if you like, sir.
Tell us from your perspective how things are going on with the federal effort.
Yes. So I think it's important to first and foremost acknowledge the fact that we're going through some really challenging times right now. We saw the jobs numbers that came out today. We're talking 14.7% unemployment. Millions and millions of jobs lost, and of course the tragic loss of life. And so we're going through a lot right now. And to me, what's imperative is that our government step up and meet the challenge. We have to do better. We have to put partisanship aside. We've got to do all we can to ensure that we are doing right by communities all across the country. And that means, of course, supporting our small businesses. For me, it also means supporting our farmers here at home. It really is about supporting all working folks who are going through a tremendous amount of difficulty right now. There are a number of bills that I'm sure you're all familiar with that we were able to focus on early on. The biggest one, of course, was the CARES Act, which established the PPP program as well as the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. These are critical programs, and we had to plus those programs up in the interim bill 3.5, and we did do that. We were able to add some additional funding because of the fact that we know the demand is so high. Importantly, we were able to carve out $60 billion for underserved communities of that, tranche of money that will go directly to our rural areas and the like. We know that there were some issues in the first go around, although I'm happy to hear the amount of money that was been distributed so far in Ulster County. Amazing to hear those numbers. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan, we've had to go back and forth there for some time, back and forth with the SBA to make sure that our farmers are eligible for that loan. After a back and forth exchange between myself and I led a letter in this regard, we were able to secure eligibility for our farmers. There's now some questions about the full extent of the loan and whether or not that loan is going to be capped at $150,000. I just led a letter to get some clarity on that. I think it's important for our folks to know what that loan amount is going to total. It's a big difference between $2 million and $150,000. There's a big delta there. We want to make sure that we're able to account for it and provide some clarity on. I think it's also important to note that as we move forward and thinking about the next steps for dealing with our economy and focusing on ensuring that we have some transparency with regards to how the funding is lent. We know that a lot of public companies receive the PPP, and we know that they're also now going to be returning a good portion of that. I think we legislatively could do a lot better in making sure that we are more targeted in who, in fact, should be receiving these funds. And so I think in our next go round, hopefully we can address that concern. There's also been some concerns about the timing piece, the fact that you have to, utilize the funds within 8 weeks. And yet with the self-isolation, social distancing guidelines, it is complicated for a number of businesses to get a real sense of how fast they can open up. So we've got to be better about allowing for more flexibility around the timeline piece there when it comes to loans and how fast you have to use them. So that's a big piece. We've also heard some questions about the breakdown, right, on the PPP, the 75% that can go towards, your overhead, your costs, even tell your employers, keeping your employers on payroll, and then the 25% that can go towards things like rent and overhead. A lot of folks are saying that that balance might not be right, and it might be more useful for them to be able to actually have a better balance in that regard. So we're talking that through as well. A number of issues that I want to focus on too in terms of what we've done with the Fed Reserve and the Treasury. The Fed Reserve and the Treasury have a $2.3 trillion loan program. I wrote a letter along with my colleagues on the Small Business Committee, asking them to prioritize micro businesses with less than 25 employees and provide them with fair terms. We also asked for specialized access, capital access needs of independent contractors, sole proprietors, and micro businesses. And we also asked them to lend to traditionally underserved communities. So we are focusing in that regard as well, and we'll see how things go from there. The future, and I don't want to take too much time up, I'm happy to answer questions, but the future legislation that we have to focus on, of course, is state and local government. State and local government. There's a big push right now legislatively to get that done. I introduced a bill, a bipartisan bill, I'll note, that will make sure we have direct relief to our localities, our counties, our towns, our villages, our hamlets. I joined my colleague, Republican colleague, Lee Zeldin, to introduce this bill. It's the Direct Support for Communities Act. It provides local governments of all sizes with direct increased support for lost revenues and losses due to the COVID-19 emergency. So again, being able to provide real relief to our local governments is going to be of critical importance. We're talking about teachers. We're talking about our police officers. We're talking about our firefighters. And being able to maintain these services is going to be critically important to our local economy as a whole. So that's a big bill that we're focusing on now. Hopefully it'll be included in the fourth package that we're currently working on. Now I'll just conclude with a little bit on testing and the question of reopening. As we work through the kinks here when it comes to the PPP program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, as we also make sure that we follow closely what the USDA is going to be doing with regard to the CFAP program, the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, which has a disaster or direct payment plan, as well as a food purchase program component. We have to be thoughtful about what opening the economy is going to look like and what's going to be required to do that. The last bill we passed had $75 billion that went to our hospitals and $25 billion that went to testing. The testing component is going to be critical here. We know that if we're going to open up the economy again, if we're going to open up restaurants, if we're going to open up, movie theaters and the like, even summer camps, we have to be in a position where we know how to contain the potentiality of this outbreak happening again. And the only way to do that is if we have meaningful testing capacity. And I think $25 billion, that is a start to make sure that every state across the country, and of course here at home in New York, is prepared to do that. To be clear, we've got to be in a position where as we make ourselves more vulnerable and open up, if we notice that there's another outbreak emerging, that we can test where that outbreak is occurring and contain it. That is how we can move in a reasonable, common sense and safe fashion in the days and months ahead. So a lot of work to do as we think through the remaining pieces of legislation that we have to secure to protect families and maintain our economy. I serve on the Small Business Committee. I serve on the Ag Committee. And so you better believe I'm going to continue to be very focused on these issues as we move forward. And I am happy, to take any questions on any host of issues, particularly around what we've done so far to assist our small business community. Thank you.
Okay, and we do invite our members and the public to send their questions in on Facebook, and we'll get them to the Congressman. Just in terms of the timeline for another round, what does it look like from your perspective? And will that be covering some of the other areas that you and I have discussed in the past, and those areas that were not included in prior stimulus bills?
Well, I would say the timeline that we're looking at right now is somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 week to 2 weeks out. That's a very broad range. I'll acknowledge, but it's hard in this environment sometimes to read the tea leaves. I know that there's a lot of ongoing conversations on the next package and making sure that we do all we can to get the much needed urgent relief. It's hard to know if we're going to be able to make a number of the fixes that I know are critical when it comes to PPP or the economic injury disaster loan. And for example, we know that chambers currently are not eligible for the PPP program, but they are eligible for the economic injury disaster loan. And so, I know there's been some discussions around how we could make chambers eligible for the PPP program. And again, the timeline issue that I flagged is going to be a focus. But to be candid with you, I think the biggest issue that we have confronted with right now, is the state and local funding piece. That is the area where I think the vast majority of my colleagues understand we've got to do something. This is across the political spectrum. This is not a partisan issue. And so to me, as we think through the next step, I think the focus is going to be in the matter of a week or two on state and local funding.
And that'll include school districts, can I assume?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, the school districts are going to be a huge piece. I was just on the phone with Senator Seward yesterday, talking about this very issue. He, gave me a call and, we talked about the need here to make sure that we are prioritizing our school districts. We are hearing calls, potentially budget cuts that are going to impact employment, and we can't let that happen. We just can't. And so, yes, this is a definite focus of mine and a definite focus of the overall package when it comes to state and local funding.
Congressman, what about one of our questions from one of the viewers? What are you doing as far as what can be done as far as hazard pay for the frontline employees like nurses, aides, environmental services, and so forth? They really are out there every day dealing with this.
You're absolutely right. They are out there every day doing amazing work, putting themselves in harm's way daily, and in some cases doing so without the necessary equipment. I have talked with folks in the front lines almost daily across the district, and I've heard the issues around a lack of masks, a lack of testing in some cases, a lack of gowns in other cases. And we've coordinated with the governor and the governor's office repeatedly to secure these supplies for folks on the front lines. It is utmost importance that we do all we can to protect them and provide. And so to the question of hazard pay, yes, that is very much a part of the conversation. There's a Heroes Fund that I anticipate will be included as part of the next go round here. It is still, I would imagine, from my vantage point at least, in the early stages of what it's going to look like and the scale of it. But I do know for sure that there are conversations ongoing about hazard pay for our folks on the front lines, and of course, roping that into a larger package to support our heroes all across the country. So yes, that is a focus, and I think one should expect something like that in the next package.
It's probably a bit early to talk about the impact further down the road, but I wonder what will the federal budget look like in a year or 2 years in terms of some of the other areas of spending. Have you already gotten a flavor from congressional leaders what programs might be at risk to pay for all of the stimulus money?
That is a very important question. One of the things that we have to think about moving forward is understanding that even before this crisis and this pandemic hit, we were in serious debt, national debt, largest debt in the country's history. We were already well above $1 trillion in deficit. These were the economic conditions before the pandemic. Of course, the unemployment numbers were certainly significantly lower, but in terms of the fiscal health of our books as a country, we weren't in great shape. And we had, and I've been talking about this for a long time. When we spend, we have got to spend in a way that provides a return on the investment. We can't just give money away and expect that it's somehow going to materialize into economic growth. We know that if we invest in broadband access or infrastructure or education or workforce development, that these will provide a return on the investment and enable our communities to prosper. So we're going to have to spend to some degree, particularly to get through the situation that we're in now. And what's important to understand is what this pandemic has revealed is how critical some of these issues or some of these needs are, like broadband, like the fact that I'm online right now with you, being able to have this virtual connection. Our students are relying on the same types of platforms. Telemedicine falls within the same rubric. And so the notion that we have communities across New York 19 in this country, because they're rural and that's about it, don't have the ability to have broadband access is absurd. It's obscene in our country. And so for me, this needs to be a touchstone, a sort of jumping off point of recognition that we can do a lot better to make sure that in these times of calamity, we're not making it even more difficult for folks to sustain themselves unnecessarily and in a way that is deeply unfair. And so to me, yes, we have to be smart about how we spend, but the way we spend is going to speak to how we can grow ourselves out of this. The lesson here is that when we spend, we've got to spend smart. We've got to be targeted in that approach. That, to me, is how we can grow the economy coming out of this.
Obviously, a lot of concerns being also discussed locally about our not-for-profits. Many of them operated on a very slim margin to begin with. Any advice or thought for not-for-profit organizations and how they can weather this storm?
Couple things. One, our not-for-profits are eligible first and foremost, for PPP. They are eligible. So I would encourage not-for-profits to utilize that. I do know that for some instances there are challenges with the size requirement that could limit, the access for not-for-profits. And I have signed on to letters with my colleagues, trying to make exceptions for our not-for-profits, understanding the critical role that they play in this situation. So two parts, right? One is PPP is available to our not-for-profits, and to the extent that employee cap, that 500 employee cap is a limitation, we are trying to work through that, and hopefully we can have some resolution on that in the next package. It is a critically important area of concern. There's so much value that our not-for-profits bring to the table, not just economically, but in terms of just the social integrity of our communities. And I think it's imperative that we do all that we can to support and provide meaningful relief. So I think not just the PPP program, but the economic injury disaster loan is available as well. So encourage not-for-profits to pursue both paths with the understanding that we know there could be limitations with the employee count, and we're working on that.
Employees may be hired in the coming months and years for jobs that don't currently even exist, Congressman. What about training or retraining our workers for this new normal employment opportunities of the future?
Yes, to me, that's where the dollars can be spent wisely. When we think about allocating our resources and being smart about how we are better prepared to sustain ourselves through this, and it's going to be a long haul. We should seize the opportunity here to really double down our efforts in workforce development, double down our efforts in making sure that we are propping up those job training programs, those apprenticeship programs, propping up the career technical education piece to all of this, to make sure that we are doing all we can to think through the mechanics of what the, new normal would look like and how the economy would function in that space. I mean, just take, for example, the amount of work that's going to continue to be done online, and how businesses are going to have to figure out how to readjust or adjust, their platform to sort of, compensate for that reality, and how our workforce in kind is going to have to be able to be have the skill set, if you will, to make that adjustment too. So just thinking about the ways in which our workforce needs to be more adaptable in that regard is going to be critically important. And we should start thinking now about those kind of programs that prepare us for that type of transition moving forward.
And can you envision the small businesses of tomorrow and the struggles they're going through today to attempt to determine what it's going to look like at the same time while the state is saying it's okay for more and more essential businesses to open, the difficulty that they're going to be having and looking to the federal government wherever possible for any further assistance?
Yeah, so I want to make sure I understand the question. Is the question, should small business owners
they're right now in the process of preparing to open. Just in the last few days, some retail laws were enacted by the state, which says you can have one person in the store. It's got to be online purchases. You can do a curbside delivery. But a lot of this is open to interpretation. Automobile dealerships were just allowed in New York State to begin to open and to have one employee. And now you can finally do test drives with cars. So that whole rollout process and the mechanism is pretty much left up to the individual small business owner to determine on his own. And I'm just wondering how the federal government can help out in terms of being there as a support mechanism for the small businesses that are really struggling in this with these new rules and regulations.
Well, okay, I understand. That is a challenge. And I think that's also why, one of the things that I've struggled with is the lack of any sort of nationalized, approach to dealing with this. We don't have a sort of, comprehensive nationwide testing plan. We've allocated the funds, and the administration has decided, let's let the states decide how they want to manage this. And so there's no real sort of, reference point. And of course, there can be no one size fits all approach, given the different hotspots that we're experiencing across the country in some areas that have had no cases. So you can't have a one size fits all, but it would be nice if we were able to create some type of comprehensive approach to what are the steps that we would hope small business owners might take in terms of what they need to have, on their premises, or the types of protocols that they want to have, set up in their businesses for folks to follow, rules of the road, if you will, that everybody can kind of tap into and understand. And I think there's a lack of understanding, or there's a gap in providing that at the federal level. Now, I will say that, and I would encourage, our small business owners to reach out both to my office, but also to the SBA and the regional reps who can provide some guidance too. And I would suspect too that those reps are coordinating with public health officials as well. So even though you might not be able to look up and see at the federal level, so clear guidelines on how, you should be operating. And I do think we're working legislatively on, making sure we have, workforce safety requirements and things of that nature. But I would say for the in the weeds type stuff, you might want to start with your SBA regional rep and to get a real feel from that person. Okay, what steps are being taken? What are the guidelines that the agencies would recommend, and then go from there. I think that would be helpful. But I get it. I mean, it's a complicated terrain to have to sort of work through for our business owners.
Okay. Another question from Facebook. Do you fear that other states are reopening too soon, too fast, and what can New York do to prevent that from having an impact on us?
Well, what I'm concerned about is, trying to do this without knowing where we're walking. I understand mightily the desire to want to get us back to what we were doing before the pandemic. We all want to be back in that place. And there's a real desire to do that. But that desire is a subjective one, and it's based on feeling. It's not grounded in any type of facts or evidence or data. And if we're going to move collectively, we need to have an objective reference point. We need to be able to say, okay, here are some rules of the road based on data, based on facts that we can collectively get comfortable with and give ourselves some visibility into what we're walking into. So what does that translate into? To me, it translates into testing. And, the studies have suggested that we're going to need at least twice, 3 times the amount of testing capacity to comfortably extend ourselves as a country without risking finding ourselves right back in the same position we were in 6, 7, 8 weeks ago. And so we have to be thoughtful about how we do this work. And so I don't necessarily think that places are opening up too fast, from the standpoint of, you shouldn't be trying to open up. But if you are trying to open up without a real sense of what your strategy is going to be, in the event there is another outbreak, in the event that because you've made yourself more vulnerable now, there could be another uptick, what is the plan? Where are the testing sites? How are you going to contain it? And if you can't formulate that strategy, and if you look at what you have on the ground and you say, okay, we don't have enough PPE anymore, we don't have enough, testing kits, well, then maybe you should think twice about how fast you open up. So it's really about understanding the landscape of each part of the country and to get a read. And that's the responsibility of the folks on the ground and the leaders on the ground to be able to know that and do that. Otherwise, you're just flying blind. And this is too risky here. We're talking life and death, to fly blind on this.
We have heard anecdotally from a number of our members in the real estate profession that we'll see a dramatic change in that area, that industry in the coming months and years, almost the same as post 9/11, with folks moving to the country, as it were, to get away from the big metropolitan cities. And we wonder what kind of an impact that's going to provide, or that's going to cause on all of our services with more people, but a booming housing industry to show for it.
Well, I think what we want to be able to do is manage whatever that push or that drive is, and be able to optimize the potential value there. We have to be in a position, one, to be able to, I would say, absorb it, right? And absorb it in a way that allows us to really, truly benefit from an economic standpoint. Again, that speaks to the need for things like broadband. It speaks to the need for quality cell service. There is an opportunity as that migration happens, if it continues to push up north, for us to utilize the opportunity to spring ourselves into more economic growth. But we have to have the capacity, and we have to have the infrastructure to embrace that. And we've got to make it easier for folks to conduct business here in upstate. And so to me, that's a big piece to the equation. Now, how that all works itself out with the housing piece, listen, one of the challenges I've heard from particularly the small business community is the lack of workforce housing, right? The lack of affordable housing for middle America. And how do you keep families? How do you build a future if you don't have affordable housing? And we at the federal level haven't done enough, I would say, in decades to think about, not just, housing for those who are of, low income, which is important, but also those working families who are in the middle income now, who still in this environment are finding challenges when it comes to, work, affordable housing, I should say. So we have a lot of work to do in this space that I think, should be prioritized as we think through what the future looks like here at home.
So I think one of the things that kind of got lost in all of the news around the pandemic is the importance of the 2020 census. One of our Facebook questions is to dealing with that. Can you talk about the importance of the census being completed and how that would have a dramatic impact on our congressional district and New York State, for that matter?
Yeah, no, it's so important. And I actually flagged this on my last telephone town hall. We have got to be able to submit the work, and even if you can't, and with the broadband issues, you still can dial in or mail in forms. So please take advantage of doing this. It is so important that we are counted. And the reason why it is important that we're counted is primarily because, the number count dictates where the resources go, how the money is allocated. And if we're not fully accounted for, then the money that we receive is not going to meet our needs. There's going to be a short, right? And so we have to be in a position where we are able to say, here is the population, here's the breakdown, here are where you can see the needs are going to be. If it's more senior oriented, young, or more youthful, whatever the case might be, here's the breakdown, and it's an accurate accounting of what we are doing here. And so absolutely, it is imperative that folks make sure that we provide this information. It's what makes our job, in terms of appropriating funds, one that is grounded in accuracy and not, politics, if you will, but really in the data. And I think so. Yes, it's a very important issue. I know that this is something that has been ongoing, and we can't take our eye off the ball when it comes to this issue. We have to be counted.
I'll digress from COVID for a minute and remind our viewers that you do have an office located right here in Kingston. Can you give contact information for those folks who would like to see your local representative in person and either call or stop in?
Well, first thing I can do, I have a bunch of contact information here that I want to make sure I give to you. So the first thing is, if you go to the delgado.house.gov website, number one, there's a phone appointment app tool. Okay, that tool will allow you to schedule a phone appointment with our office. Number one, there's also a resource guide on the delgado.house.gov website that'll take you through the different platforms, whether it's small business aid, farmer aid, direct payment checks, unemployment, whatever the case might be. We have different resource guides there. And then, yes, we do have physical locations, but consistent with the protocol of social distancing, we are now operating virtually. But that being said, our phone lines are open. We have real people answering the phones, and we are getting a lot of incoming. For those who do want to call the office, the number at my Kingston office, which covers the district, now the general line, is 845-443-2930. 845-443-2930. So that would be the most direct way to get to my office here in the district.
Okay. Again, thank you for your time. We have a couple more questions we want to try to get to before our time is up. And this has to do with the EIDL loan. We have one viewer who applied on March 31st and hasn't heard anything. What's your opinion on the response time? What are you hearing in terms of people getting back to those folks who filled out the applications?
Yes. Now, the issue could have been that at that time, the funds were, so low that they weren't in a position to even offer any loans. And I know that there are a number of small businesses who were receiving notices that weren't clearly in that vein or made that explanation explicit, but that was in fact what the case was. We've now since replenished the fund, and I would expect that if you have submitted an application, that you would still be in line. In fact, that's what we've been informed. If you've already submitted paperwork and then we refunded or we plussed up the program thereafter, there's no need to reapply. You're already in the queue. You'll be able to have your application reviewed. Now, the challenge is, though, that the fund itself, there's been a lack of clarity, if you will, on just who's eligible, who's not eligible. We had to fight to get farmers to be eligible for a while. So I just think there's been a lot of confusion by the SBA to some degree on how it needs to administer these loans. In fact, when we were able to successfully get the EIDL loans to be eligible for our farmers, within a day after that, after we passed the interim bill, the SBA said to our farmers, well, don't bother applying because the loan program, the wait line is too long and you won't be able to access the funds anyway. So there was already a big backlog on that. We then had to turn around and, make sure the SBA ultimately would allow our farmers to apply. But even still now, our non-ag business owners are being told, don't bother applying. So I'm probably not offering you as much clarity as you would like, but that's more so because the way in which the SBA has administered the EIDL loan has been far from clear. And we've tried our best from my office to get more visibility on this. I would, ask you just to call my office and we can maybe help you in a more individual way on this very issue. And I think if not our office, you should certainly call your regional SBA rep too. They can be helpful in that regard. But if you already have applied, you should, assuming that all the paperwork is correct, you should be able to receive something in the coming days. But I will need a bit more information on that individual case to know exactly what to expect.
Okay. Got an unemployment question for you. The additional federal unemployment benefits extend through July 31st. Any word on an extension, and if the week of July 31st could be considered a full week and is eligible? I have to look at the calendar to see that exactly, but any word about an extension beyond the end of July?
Good question. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. That is a question that when I talk to my colleagues about the next package, the focus has not been, at least as of right now, on the unemployment piece. I will say, though, coming out of today and looking at the numbers that we saw with, 20 million jobs being lost in April, I'd imagine that that's going to wake some people up in terms of what might be required moving forward. So I can't speak to the exact timeline issue as well, because we haven't even, I don't think, just generally speaking, I don't think there's really been a robust conversation just yet about how to, or whether to extend the unemployment piece. As I've noted, the issue for us, at least right now, has been state and local. Because if you think about it and you look at some of the counties in my district, from Sullivan County to Schoharie County, people are losing jobs in county official positions and our teachers are, in a tough spot because of the lack of state and local funding. So one way that we can curtail that unemployment number is to make sure that we are funding our state and local governments. Okay.
I guess good luck to you. We thank you for taking time. I know you're a very, very busy man lately. You seem to be everywhere. What's the schedule in terms of Congress meeting? Are you doing it long distance just like this? What are your plans?
Once again, to be here with everybody. And, I wish it could have been in person. The schedule, it seems from this vantage point to be, we're going to at least come back to DC to vote at some point in the next week or two on the next package, which will include, I would hope, funding for state and local governments. That's what I have an understanding of with as we speak right now. Now, does that mean then that we're going to work from DC for the foreseeable future? I think we're still trying to figure that out. Are we going to be able to agree on a bipartisan basis to have proxy voting? Are we going to be able to agree maybe to have remote voting? This is the challenge that lies ahead. In the meantime, we're continuing to speak remotely. We're continuing to have virtual meetings. I'm continuing to engage with my constituents on the ground through telephone town halls, through platforms like this. I speak with my local advisory groups as well on a weekly basis. And I'm continuing to introduce legislation that I think can help meet the needs, like the bill that I introduced with Lee Zeldin to make sure that we have direct relief for our localities on the ground. I also introduced a bill recently to make sure that we can forgive some of the major ag loans that the USDA provides, up to $250,000 for our farmers. So I'm busy, legislating from home and making sure that, we're in a position moving forward to really help our communities all across the district.
All right. Thank you again for your time, Congressman Antonio Delgado. We appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the day. Be safe.
All the best.
All right. Thank you, Congressman Antonio Delgado, our guest today on our Friday Forum. We appreciate him taking the time, and we again, of course, want to thank the people responsible for today's program. I do want to thank our good friends at Gagnon and Associates CPAs, Ulster Savings Bank, and Puriclean Professional Restoration, and of course, thanks to Jeremy Ellenbogen at Ellenbogen Creative Media here at the 721 Media Center for use of your studios. A couple of reminders before we sign off today. We'd like to bring everybody up to date on some events we have this month. And this is taking place right now, starting today through the 16th of May. The Chamber's Young Ulster Professionals are hosting a virtual 5K race to benefit People's Place. You can run, walk, bike, or hike for fun and exercise while helping the great programs offered by the People's Place in Kingston. This virtual 5K event takes place either outdoors or on your home treadmill or exercise bike. Register online at ulsterchamber.org and pay just $15 per person to participate, or $30 for a family of 4. Everyone who takes part is entered into a random drawing to win one of several gift cards donated by the Emerson Resort and Spa, Turn Up the Beat, as well as New York Strong t-shirts from Hamilton and Adams. There is no question this is a difficult time for our small members, especially those members in retail. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, however, as we mentioned a little while ago about small stores being open and being able to operate online with one person in the store at a time. To help out our small businesses and in conjunction with Ulster County Executive Pat Ryan, we are launching our second Shop Ulster Saturday 1 week from tomorrow. So we invite you to start your holiday shopping early this year and help our small businesses at a time when they really, really need your help. Call your favorite store or shop online. Let's make May 16th, that is, a banner day for all the small retail stores in our region. I want to remind everybody that our next event will be our May 19th virtual breakfast meeting featuring a discussion of the regional and New York State economy with State Controller Tom DiNapoli, Deputy Controller Elliot Auerbach, and Ulster County Executive Pat Ryan. Join us on live stream or the Chamber's Facebook page. The Ulster County Regional Chamber of Commerce is especially grateful to our amazing corporate sponsors. As a result of their commitment to the Chamber of Commerce and our 1,000 local businesses, we're able to continue our work supporting the local business community. Please support these businesses, our corporate sponsors that support your Chamber of Commerce. And thanks as well to our board of directors and our chamber staff. The Chamber Board has been a single-focused organization, all working to assist the Chamber staff during a critical time in our history. They are performing an extraordinary service, and for that, we can't thank them enough. We are so grateful to them. And our amazing Chamber staff, Carol, Jess, Val, Allison, and our foundation director, Ingrid Kulik. You are doing wonderful work for our small business in our region. We thank you so much. So let's try to end our programs on a positive note. So for those of you planning on spending some quality time with your family this weekend, our recommendation is to turn on HBO Sunday night for the premiere of a 6-part series, which was filmed right here in Ulster County last year. I Know This Much Is True, starring Mark Ruffalo and Melissa Leo. According to the Hudson Valley Film Commission, the filming of this series had an economic impact of more than $15 million in direct spending. That included more than 27,000 rooms rented at local lodging establishments and the employment of more than 50 local crew members and more than 1,500 local background extras. It was a huge boost to our local economy as Ulster County continues to offer the type of scenic beauty that many filmmakers are looking for. So again, the suggestion for your must-see TV this weekend, Sunday night, 9 o'clock, HBO, I Know This Much Is True. To all of our chamber members, we sincerely miss seeing you in person. We look forward to a time when we'll be back at our breakfast meetings and our networking mixers. If you're not a chamber member yet, we invite you to go to ulsterchamber.org for information on all the benefits of chamber membership. In the meantime, look for us on social media. Follow Ulster Eateries United and Ulster Small Businesses United. And let's get on the road to recovery today. Thanks so much for joining us today. Look forward to seeing you back here for our May 19th virtual breakfast meeting. And until then, be safe and enjoy the weekend. Thank you.